Did you know you can use Unreal Engine visual scripting system Blueprint to build tools that can save you time and make you look cool? Last week I was capturing button thumbnails for my template AAC Interactive and I struggled with studio lighting. I wanted a tool that allowed me to experiment with light, to change their values, and to swap presets. So I built one with Blueprint. If you're new to visual scripting, this tutorial is just for you. So today we're going to learn how to create a studio light rig, a reusable tool that simplifies the process of lighting your projects in Unreal Engine. And my hope is to spark your creativity, to learn more Blueprint, and to build even more tools. So if you're ready to save time and level up, let's get started. If you want to follow along, you can find this scene in a link in the description. You will have this nice texture that I made with a texture graph inside Unreal Engine and this comfortable sofa, or you can download something like the automotive configurator, have a dark scene, so we can focus only on the lights. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is to open my project location, the folder. I will create another folder, call it Blueprints, and in here I'm going to create another folder, and that's where we are going to create our assets. So I'm going to call this something like Studio Light Rig, and let's open this. Now, we are going to create our first asset, which is a blueprint. So right click and go to Blueprint class, and we want to select the first option we have, an actor. This is the most basic type of blueprint, and in 90% of the scenarios when you are creating actors and systems with blueprint, you want to choose an actor. So click on that and let's give it a name. We can call this something like light rig. Let's open this actor now. We need two elements. The second element is a light, and the first element is something we want to attach the light to, and that is a spring arm. So if you go to components, click on add and scroll to where we have camera. Usually we attach the camera to the spring arm, but today we want to attach a light to the spring arm. So click on spring arm, and while spring arm is selected, click on add again, search for light and select a type of light you are interested with. It can be a point light, rectangular light, or a spotlight, but in my case we want to create a rectangular light. And this will be attached directly to the spring arm. Now, there are few options that we care about in the spring arm. One of them for later is the rotation, because we want to rotate the spring arm. And the other is the target arm length. As you can see, if we increase or decrease this, the light is following. And the second or the third option is do collision test. Let's talk about this. So now, if we add our actor to our level, it looks fine. But if you change the rotation, so I'm going for now to set the rotation to 0. And I will go back, you can see the light now is centered at the 0. So this is one of the spring arm features, because usually we attach a camera and there might be a wall here. If it detects a collision, a wall, the camera will be here. And the same can be on our other actors. So if I move this around like so, you can see now, in order to avoid this, what we need to do is to set the do collision test from true to false. And we can go back, and as you can see now, it's not doing that collision test. Let's say you want to access the settings of the spring arm and the light from here, from the details panel. You want to create a simple tool where we can access some settings and change them. Well, that's exactly where the construction script comes in. The construction script allow us to create tools that speed up our workflow and the world building we're doing and automate things. It has many features, and one of them is what we are going to create today, the light rig tool. And as I said, it will run inside the editor, inside the viewport, unlike the event graph that only runs when we click on play. Let's go to the construction script and let's click on the spring arm, click and drag, and this will get the spring arm for us. We can click and drag from here to add some nodes that are related for the spring arm. I explained in the past, if you want to access the properties of any component of any actor, you can simply take a look at the name of the property and you can also search for it. So let's say target arm length. You can simply click and drag from here and search for target arm length. We have get the current target arm length and we have set the target arm length. So I'm going to click and this will add this node for us. So I'm going to connect this here, the execution pin. And now if you compile, you will see that this is now is set to 0. If you set this to something like 150 and go back when we need to compile, so let's compile, you can see now this is 150. As we said, we want to see the setting from here. So for that, we can either create a new variable and connect it here or click on this input pin here and promote it to a variable. Click and it will have also the same name, which can save us some time. Now, when you compile, you will see the default value now. So before compilation, it says, please compile to see the default value. So it's always important to compile every time we do some changes to see the default values, to see if anything is right or wrong, and so on. Now, let's also say we want to be able to set the intensity of the light. So you can either click and drag the light here, or you can have the light to be selected like so. Then right click, as you can see here, the first option we have is called function on rectangular light. So if you enable this, you will see settings that are related for the rectangular light. If we search for something like intensity, we can set intensity of the rectangular light and this will also get the light for us. So now all we need to do is to connect this here and we need now to promote this to a variable. So instead of promoting this to a variable, what I'm going to do to create a new variable, and I will call it something like light intensity. And I will click here where we have the boolean. This is true or false, the type of variable, and we want to change this to a float. So a float is a number, as you can see from the pin here. So click, add this, you can get it or set it. So we need to get it and connect this here. Now compile, and we need to set the I here, or we need to set the variables to instance editable. This will make these variables public so we can see them from the details panel. Right now we don't see anything, but if you make these two public or instance editable and compile, we are going to see a new tab here that says default, and under it we have target arm length and the light intensity. So if you increase or decrease this, you will see the light. And if you change the light intensity, we can now turn on the light on and off, as you can see. Beautiful. All right, so now we have a basic understanding of what we want to create. We want now to think about how in the construction script we can add multiple lights that are attached to multiple spring arms, and we want to add some other variables to change some other settings like the rotation of each spring arm and some other settings like the light, door, color, temperature, and so on. The possibilities are endless. All right, now before we continue, I want to clean up our blueprint. So I'm going to open back the blueprint again. I'm going to select everything we've created to demonstrate what we are going to build, remove them, and the same for my variables here. In my case, because I want to have multiple actors and I want more scalability options, we are going to remove the variables and we are going to create a structure asset that will contain our variables and we can keep adding variables to it. So let's press Ctrl space and locate our asset. Next to our asset, right click and let's go to blueprint and we want to create a structure. Let's give it a name. So I'm going to add S for a structure and I'm going to call this something like rig data. Let's open this and let's talk about it. So a structure groups different types of data like numbers, colors, and other settings all into a single container. It's like custom data type that allow you to create and hold variables together like the light settings. So just like we've created earlier, the variables here, we are going to create our variables now in the structure and add the structure to our blueprint and access it from the blueprint. So open the structure and let's create our first variable here. which is the spring arm length, and we can simply call it just arm length, okay? And we can set the variable type from Boolean to float. And you can see here we have a preview of the structure. Let's add the rotation. So add another variable and let's call this arm rotation and select the variable type and select rotator. Now let's add a couple of settings for our light. Let's add 2 or 3 variables and let's set the first one to something like light intensity, and let's set the next variable here to light color, and this one here let's call it light temperature. And let's not forget to set the values here. So the light intensity is another float, the light color is a color, so click and search for color and select the color, and as you can see the color here is another type of structure, so it's possible to add structures inside structures and so on. And this is a structure similar to the rotator, by the way. It's also a structure because it contains multiple values. So here when you click we have R, G, B. Each one of these is a float and they are all within one setting, so that's a structure. And the same for the arm rotation, X, Y, Z. Float, 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 together they form a structure. Finally, for the light temperature, let's select this and let's set this to a float. Let's save and let's copy the name of our asset here so we can easily find it, or we can just search for it. Now we need to add this to our blueprint. So let's open our blueprint and let's add a new variable and let's give it a name like light setup or lights setup. And we want to switch this from a float to the asset we just made, which is s underscore light rig data, the name we just copied. So you can either type the name s light rig data, or because we copied the name you can paste the same name, then select the structure like so. Now here it says please compile the blueprint to see the default value. If you compile, you will see we have lights setup and an arrow. If you open this arrow, you are going to see the default settings or the variables we've created, all contained within one structure instead of having many variables here, because we will have many variables for later. This also makes it easier to expand on the settings we have here as well and reuse this structure across multiple blueprints if we need to. Now, something I'd like to change in the default settings here is the arm length. Instead of 0, let's set it to 300, for example. The arm rotation on the y-axis, I want to set this to something like -15. The light intensity, I'm going to set this to something like 8. And the light color, I'm going to set it to white. And the light temperature, I'm going to set it to 6500. These are all default values. If you save this, and if you go back to our blueprint, it will say, please recompile because we changed one of its variables. So that's something important to know. When you change anything within the structure, anything that is using this structure, we must recompile it. And please keep that in mind. Right now, if you click on the structure here and we go to the variable type, we defined the variable type, and next to the variable type we have multiple types. We have single, array, we have single, array, set, and map. These are topics for future. If you want, let me know in the comments, but array is what we want to choose. Right now this is set to single and this will give us one single light, but if we want some sort of container that holds many types of the same object, then we want to select an array. Click on array, click on compile again, and you will see here this changed. So now we have the ability to add multiple single actors, and each of these contain the same default values we've added earlier. Of course, I want to add these from a different place, so let's clear the array to remove all the elements, but to demonstrate I've added these. So now let's just simply clear it, and I hope you get the idea. So To recap, an array is a list that stores multiple values of the same type, like multiple lights or multiple objects of the same type. It's like a container that holds many items in specific order, starting from index 0. Now, we need to click and get this array. Let's get it like so. And when you add an array, to extract its values or the different actors it has, we need to do a node that is called for each loop. So if you click and drag from the array, you're going to find under utilities array we have for each loop. So add this, and for each loop will run through the actors. So if you have 3 actors, this will run 3 times. 1 for this, 2, and 3. So as I said, index 0 is the start of the array. Just keep that in mind. To demonstrate little what I mean here, this will run 3 times. I'm going to copy these and I will go to the event graph, and on event begin play, I will paste these and I will connect this here, and I will add a node and let's call it print string, and I'm going to connect this here. Since our array contains 3 array elements, this will print hello for us 3 times. So I'm going to click on play. You can see we have 3 hello. The time was maybe too fast, so let's set the duration to 6 and let's click on play. You can see now we have 3 hellos. All right, let me delete everything in the event graph and let's go back to the construction script. The reason I demonstrated this with the print string to print 3 hellos is because we need now to add 3 spring arms. For example, because we have 3 elements here. Now, instead of adding the 3 elements from here, let me clear this array again. Let's select this variable, the array we've added, and let's set it to public, so it's instance editable. And now compile, and now you can see that we have our lights here. So now I can add as many lights as I want or clear them, and for every light later, we are going to add 1 spring arm and 1 light. Now, let's go back to the light rig and let's go to the viewport here. We don't want to get confused. We should not have any spring arm or any rectangular light yet, because we want to add them dynamically from the construction script. So now you can see that there is nothing. We have just the structure and the array elements we've added and their settings, but these settings now they do nothing. So that's what we want to solve now. Let's add 1 element as a start and let's go back to our blueprint. Let's connect the construction script to for each loop, and for each loop we want to add a component. So from the loop body here, we want to add a spring arm. So we can simply search for spring arm, and we are going to find under the category add component, camera, add spring arm component. So if you cancel the search and search for add component here, you can see all the sorts of components we can add. We can add lights, we can add from the camera, spring arm, cameras, and so on. So spring arm component is what we need. And if you compile now, and if we go here, you will see that, oh wow, we have a component, which is our spring arm. Beautiful. Now, if we add a light, we can also do that. So let me add a light real quick, but we will change the blueprint here. So if you search for add light, you will see add light component base, portal, and so on. What we need to do or to add is rectangular light. So let's add that as well. And let's compile. You will see in the center of our blueprint now we have the spring arm and we have our light. So if we want the light to be attached to the spring arm, we need to find a node that allow us to do that. So I'm going to click and drag and I'm going to search for attach. As you can see here, we have attach actor to actor, component to component, actor to component, and so on. So what we need to do is to click on attach component to component. For the target, what we want to attach is our light. And for the parent, we want to attach the spring arm. So I'm going to connect this here. Now, if you don't want to do this spaghetti, you can click and drag, press R, like so. As you are holding this, you can press R as many times to add a reroute node, and then connect this here. Now, if you compile and take a look, you can see that the light is now attached to our spring arm. if you remember earlier at the start of the lesson, we had a setting to disable the collision test. So now we will have the same problem. If we move this around, you can see that we have the need to disable the collision test. So to do that, you can simply click from the spring arm like so, from the return value here, and you can search for the setting we want to disable. So in this case, it's collision. If you search for collision, here under variables, camera collision, we have get and we have set. Set do collision test is what we want to change. So click on this and click on Control to move this execution pin here, and then connect this here, and this is set to false now. Click on compile, and as you can see, the collision test is no more. If you set this to true and go back here, well, we need to compile, you can see now that this is the default behavior of the spring arm because it's set to true by default. So we need to set this to false. Let's compile and save, and press Ctrl Shift S every now and then to save everything. Alright, we are making some progress. That's beautiful. And let's continue making more progress. If you're enjoying this tutorial, I invite you to study Blueprint at VR Division Academy. Take your Unreal Engine skills to the next level with my AEC Interactive Blueprint course, designed for BIM specialists, architects, and Archviz artists. This beginner-friendly course offers over 45 hours of lessons. Your projects deserve more than static renders. Let's make them explorable and interactable. If you want to learn more, check out the link in the description. Let's go back to our blueprint, and there is something I'd like to do because we will have these connections, no worries, but we will have many more connections as we go. And in order to reduce the amount of spaghetti we have, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to hold Alt and click on these pins to simply disconnect them. And after we add the spring arm component from the return value, I'm going to click and drag, and I will promote this spring arm to a variable, and I'm going to call it spring arm. Okay? Now I can connect this here, and instead of connecting this here like so, or connecting this here like so as well, what we can do is bring the variable we just created, and we can simply connect it here. And simply now we can remove these reroute points and connect this spring arm to the parent, like so. And we can do the same for our rectangular light. So I'm going to disconnect this, click and drag from the return value, and promote it to a variable, and let's call this rectangular light. Now I can connect this here, and I can connect the rectangular light to the target. So that's the importance of promoting things to variables. Once you promote it to a variable, you can bring that variable and connect it wherever it needs to be connected. Now, speaking of promoting things to variables, where are the settings that we've created earlier? Right now, these settings, the arm length and all these other settings, they do nothing, so we need them to be functional. Well, if you take a look, after for each loop here, we have the loop body and we have the array element. For every element we have, you can click and drag from here, and you can set or find the node break the structure light rig data we get from the array element, and you can see now we have these settings. We have the arm length, the rotation, and the light intensity, the color, the temperature, and any other settings we are going to add as we go. For that, then, what we need to do, we can start with the arm length and rotation. So now I'm going to select these two here, and I will press all my arrow keys to move them around. I will select the light and just move it to the right a little to make some space to some other elements we want to add. I will bring the spring arm, let's get it, and we set the arm length. So I'm going to click and drag and search for set arm length, and the same goes for the arm rotation. So let's search for set rotation, and we will find multiple types of rotation. We have the relative rotation and the world rotation. I want for this scenario the relative rotation. I always like to add for each one of these nodes one actor like so. And now we can connect these like so as well. Okay, for now, I'm going to connect the arm length here and I'm going to connect the arm rotation here. But later we want to promote all these to variables and it will make it easier for us to connect things where they should be. So the light intensity, for example, since we promoted this to a variable, of course, we need to connect it like so, okay? Here we can bring our light. So let's bring the rectangle light. Let's get it and let's search for set intensity and connect this here, the execution pin. And for the new intensity, instead of going to our structure here and bring the light intensity all the way like this, and you can add your reroute nodes like this. So you double click, by the way, to add a reroute node like so. But I don't like this. Since we promoted this to a variable, I can simply bring the variable we've made, light intensity, and connect that here. So you can either drop it here like so, and it will automatically get it for us, or you can click, hold Ctrl, and this will also get it for us, and you can connect it like so. And if you hold Alt, this will set the variable for you. Now, let's remove that and let's compile and test our blueprint so far. So now the default value in our structure is -15. We can change this. And now we can change the light intensity. So now it's set to 8. We need to set the light setting. So right now, if it's unitless, the default value is 5000. But if we are using candelas, we can set it to 8. So we have multiple options here. I don't like this. I want to bring this back to 8. And I will go back to my blueprint. So by the way, there is a shortcut. You can hold Ctrl and Tab to switch between your active files. So I'm going to go to my blueprint and I will go to where we have add light component. And I can also change the settings from here. So similar to the collision test we've done here, if you don't want to do this, you can click on the spring arm and you can do collision test, set this to false, and now we can actually remove this because now it's set to false. And the same we can do for our light components. So you can either click and drag from the light and search for units. We can search for set intensity units, and here we can choose a value from this enumeration. We will talk about how we can make this later. So right now the default value is unitless, but we want to use candelas. So you can either do that from here or select the add rectangular light component and switch the intensity units from unitless to candelas. And this will switch this to 8. And let's compile now and let's take a look. This is the value of 8 and you can play with this however you like. Beautiful. So I'm going to set this to 8 and I'm going to reset my settings for now. And let's go back to our blueprint. I want to promote everything in our structure to variables so we can connect things with ease. So I'm going to remove these for now and I will click on my arm length, promote to variable. I will click on my arm rotation, promote to variable, and so on. So we want to promote everything to a variable, the light intensity, and promote it to a variable again, like so. The light color, promote to a variable, and the light temperature, let's promote it to a variable as well. And any other settings we will do later, we can promote them to variables. Now, let's organize things visually a little bit, and let's connect these like so. And let's disconnect this from here. So after we promote, or yeah, we can do this or we can do this. It's really up to you. And what is the order? So now I can select all these, for example, and do this. Basically, after we promote everything to variables, we can continue adding the spring arm component and the light component and so on. This is fine. So we can go with this like so. Now here, the target arm length, we can get the arm length and connect this here. Here, for delta rotation, we can get the arm rotation and connect that here as well. And for the light, we have the light intensity at the start. We can connect that here. And for other settings like the color and temperature, let's take care of that for now as well. So I'm going to make 2 duplicates of these variables, and I will search for set light color, connect this, and move these a little like so. And for the temperature, I'm going to click and drag and search for set temperature and connect this here as well. Place this here, bring the light temperature, connect it here, and bring the light color and connect this here. So here it gave us a converter for the light color. So convert color structure to linear color structure. You can either keep this, or let's first save everything and let's go back to our structure here where we set color and let's search for linear color. Add this, let's set its default value to white color. Let's save, let's go back to the blueprint, let's compile, and let's delete these here. Perhaps I may need to promote it to a variable again. So that's something to be aware of when we promote things to variables, or once you promote things to variables and you change your data structure. Because we change this from color to linear color, this is the old connection and this is now the new connection. So if you disconnect this, if you try to connect this here, it will convert this from linear color to color, which is something we don't want. So I want to promote this to a new variable. And before we do that, let's press Ctrl Z. Let's remove this from here and from here. And let's promote this to a variable again. Okay, this is my bad. I should have selected linear color instead of color. But I also like to call these happy errors because it teaches you what kind of mistakes and errors can happen, and it can prepare you for the future when you're creating your own data structures and whatnot. So let's connect this now like so, and let's bring the variable we just made, the light color, and connect that here. So now it does not need a converter. All right, now let's compile and save, and let's take a look. So if we create another light, it will create that light for you. And now let's set this to something like 30 or any other value you want. You can do that. You can change the color of the light. You can happily do that. You can add another light. So now we are getting places. I hope you are excited as much as me. And now you can light any object like this. It's beautiful. Now there is a setting that we need to change, the temperature. You can either set its value from here, so bring the light color or the rectangular light, sorry, and search for set temperature or use temperature. This value here, set use temperature, we can do that, or we can select the light component and we can set the use temperature to true, and this will always be true. Let's compile now, and as you can see, the light temperature here of this light is 600. You can change it now to be a cold light or a warm light. Beautiful. Let's save everything where we are now, this progress. And before we continue to the next part, what I'm going to do is to clean up our blueprint a little bit. So one very useful shortcut is C. I can select everything related for the spring arm, and I can press on C and let's say spring arm settings. Here we have the rectangular light settings. We can do the same. We can call it rect light settings. Here you can select all these, for example, promoting to variables, or for this specific part, if you want less spaghetti, you can select all of this, the structure and the variables we promoted, because we will add more variables later, and we can collapse this into function. So under organization, I love this word, organization. Let's click on collapse to function. Click, and we can find under functions here, new function, where it says this, and we can call this, for example, promote struct to variables. So I'm going to call it variables, okay? So let's place this here. Let's bring these elements here and place them here. All right, now let's compile and let's save. We could stop here, but you might ask, Yahya, I like this, but I want to be able to switch the rectangular light to a point light or to a spotlight. How can we do that? I will tell you how we can do that. I just need to take 5-minute rest and I will be back to continue recording. I know you will not see this with the magic of editing, so be right back. So if you want to have the ability to change the type of light from rectangular light to a point light or to a spotlight, 3 types of lights, we need to create an enum, an enumeration. So right click, let's go back to blueprint. Here we have an enumeration. And here it says enumeration is a list of named values. And that's exactly what it is. An enum is a list of named options. For example, we can type point light, spotlight, rectangular light. Think of it as a drop-down menu that controls the behavior based on the selected category. So I'm going to create this asset and I'm going to type E for enumeration and I'm going to call this light types. Okay, let's open this and we can see here we have description and we have the ability to add an enumerator. So click 1, 2, 3. And these are our options. So the first option, for example, can be a point light. The second option can be a spotlight. And the third option will be our rectangular light. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, and let's click on save. Now, this enumeration asset we just made, we want to add this to our structure so we can see the drop-down list for each of our elements here. So let's open the structure. So press Ctrl and Tab to locate the structure if it's already open. And let's add a new variable. And let's call this variable something like light type. And let's set the type of the variable to be our enumeration. So if you type E light type, you will find this. So click on it. And here, as you see, we have a drop-down list. I'm going to set the default value to always be rectangular light and we can change this later whenever we want. I'm going to save and I'm going to my blueprint now and we need to compile because remember every time we change the structure we need to compile our blueprint. So click on compile and now we can see in our blueprint here if we click on the arrow we see light type by default is set to rectangular light. And later we will set the functionality when we change this to change the type of light to other type of light. Okay, by later I mean now. So let's open our blueprint and let's go here. So between creating the spring arm and between creating the rectangular light, we want to have some sort of way based on the selection from our list. We want to trigger an event. So we want to either create or add rectangular light, then set its settings or a point light or a spotlight. Now, since we've added a new variable to our structure, we need to go to the blueprint where we have our structure and we need to open the function we made earlier and we need to promote our structure here to a variable, similar to the other variables we've created here. So I'm going to click and drag, and I will promote the light type to a variable, like so, and I will connect this here. Next, let's go to the construction script, and let's make some space. So I'm going to select the rectangular light settings, and I'll move it to the right a little, and I'll bring my light type. I'll hold Ctrl to get it, and I will click and drag from here the new node and I will search for switch. So let's type switch and you can see under flow control switch on E light types enumeration. So based on the selected light type we are going to execute something, the logic of the light creation. So if you want to set this correctly, then if you hold Ctrl and connect this here, this is half of the equation. This is a rectangular light. We need to connect this here. And now if you compile and you want to test this, if you switch the rectangular light to a point light or spotlight, the light is going to disappear. So if you do that for the other lights, it's gone. Beautiful. So now we are onto something. Let's create the rest of the logic. And the rest of the logic is not very different from what we have in our rectangular light here. So in the spotlight, for example, you can click and drag and search for component or simply search for spotlight, and you will find under add component, light, spotlight. And if you do the same for point light, click and search for point light, add point light component. Nice, nice. Next, similar to our rectangular light settings, so create, let's call this, for example, create rectangular light and set its settings. Similar to what we have here, we promote this to a variable after we add it, and then we attach component to component. So let's do that on the spotlight. I'm going to click and drag, promote this to a variable, and I'm going to call it spotlight, and I'm going to attach component to component. I will remove the default scene root because we want the spring arm and the spotlight. So let's bring the spring arm connected to the parent and the spotlight from here. Let's connect it to the target and connect that here. And we may need to make some space. So let's make some space like so. And to be honest, what I do recommend is simply clicking here on all of this and right click and collapse to a function. So I'm going to collapse this to a function, and the same for our point light and rectangular light. And I'm going to call this create spotlight and set settings. And we will do later this for the rectangular light. Now let's open this and let's continue working on our blueprint. So you can go back always to the construction script and see the global settings we have. You can simply select these three nodes, copy them. Let's go to the spotlight here and paste them. So by global, I mean all lights have light intensity, a color, a temperature, but not all lights are going to have source width or source height and so on. We will deal with this later. We also want to add for all of our lights the attenuation radius. That's important as a setting, and we also need to add it to our structure here, but we will talk about it as we go, no problem. Now let's connect this and set up the basics. So I'm going to get light intensity, set it here. I'm going to get the light color, set it here. So it's the exact same process as we did earlier. And let's get the light temperature and set it here as well. Now, if you compile, we're going to get some errors because we need a target, and that target is our spotlight. So bring the spotlight and connect it as well to your lights here. Now, you can do this as I'm doing here, or you can have just one light and connect it like this. Both are okay. In my case, I'm just simply going to do this, and let's compile. And this is gone now, the error message. So now, let's save everything and let's test this. So I'm going to have another copy of my blueprint or the same blueprint. We can add a new array element. Let's go to the last array element and let's switch this to a spotlight. As you can see, this is now our spotlight. And I'm going to change its rotation a little, like so. Now, similar to what we did earlier to the rectangular light, we change the intensity from unitless to candelas, and we also set the temperature to be true, to always use the temperature. Now let's go back to the blueprint. Let's select our spotlight and let's set the intensity here, the units to candelas, and let's set the use temperature to be always true, and let's compile and let's save, and now we should be good. So let's increase this. You can see we have a beautiful light that is working now. If you change the arm length, you can see it's just working as intended. But we need to set the attenuation radius. Right now, we don't have any setting for the attenuation radius. So let's set that. I'm going back to my blueprint here, and I'm going to click on my structure first. I will add a new variable, and I will add this variable under the light intensity, perhaps, or under the temperature. Here should be fine. And let's call this attenuation radius. Let's set it to a float. Let's save and let's go back to our blueprint. Let's compile and save. So let's bring our spotlight and let's set attenuation radius and connect this here. For the radius, we need to go to our function promote struct to variables, and we need to get the attenuation radius from here. So I'm going to click and I will promote this to a variable, and I will connect this here and connect this here to keep things nicely organized. And now I will go to the spotlight, I will bring the attenuation radius and connect this here. And let's do the same on our rectangular light. So I'm going to the rectangular light here, and I will also set its attenuation radius like so. And let's bring the rectangular light and set it as the target. Now I can copy the name here. I can select my rectangular light, all of it, and I can also collapse it into a function. So let's do that. And let's set the name create rectangular light and set its settings. This way we keep our blueprint organized. So let's do the same for our point light, collapse it to a function, and let's name it create point light and set its settings. Now we can open any of the other functions we made earlier to copy the settings here. So I'm going to click and drag all these here, and I'm going to press Ctrl C, and I will open my point light, and I will press here Ctrl V. Okay. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to delete the spotlight targets from here, and I want to promote the point light to a variable. So let's do that from add point light component, promote that to a variable. Let's call it point light, and let's connect this here. Then let's bring the point light and connect it on the target as well, as we've done earlier at least twice. So here's the point light, and there we go. You can also press Ctrl D to duplicate, or simply Ctrl C, Ctrl V to duplicate as well. Of course, let's not forget to click on the point light component and set the intensity units to candelas and set use temperature to true. Now our blueprint at this stage is technically done. So if I click now on the last element we've added here, we can increase the radius. Now the setting is set to 0 by default. I forgot to change it to 1000 because 1000 is the default value we have on all of our lights. So let's do that in our structure. Let's save. Let's go back to the blueprint. Let's compile. And now we can see the attenuation radius. And now you can also increase this attenuation radius to whatever value you like. So if I add now, or let's switch this to something like this to make our studio setup nice. Let's decrease the intensity. Let's say something like this. Let's change the temperature to something coldish. So let's set it 11,500. And there is something you can do right now. Notice how these settings can go crazy. They can even go below 0. Perhaps this is something you don't want. You can change these behaviors from the structure. So let's say the light temperature, the value range, and the slider range, you can change both. So let's say the value range should be enough. Let's set this to 0 or 500. And let's say this here is no more than 12,500. Okay. So now let's save this and let's try again. So I'm going to the light temperature. As you can see, it starts now with 500, and you can change this to whatever value you like. Now, our blueprint disappeared because please remember, every time you change anything within the structure, you need to go back to the blueprint and compile it again. Once we do that, everything will go back to normal. Okay? All right. So you can do the same on your structure to set limits on all these values if you like. For me, I'm going to do it after. What's important for me is to tell you how to do it, how to set it at least on once, and then we can keep going. If you remember earlier, we spoke about the difference between the types of lights. They all have global shared values like the intensity, the units, the attenuation radius, and some other settings like the temperature and so on. But they also have special settings depending on the light type. In this case, for example, of a rectangular light, we have the source width, height, barn door angle, length, the source texture, and on a spotlight, we have the inner and outer cone, for example, the source radius, the soft source radius, the length, and so on. And some of these settings are also shared with the point light. So if you add a point light as well, you will see here that we have source radius, soft source radius, and the source length. So our next step is to create the variables to set these settings, because it would be nice to be able to change the settings of our rectangular light from here, and the same for our spotlight from here as well. Right now there are no settings to change the source width and height and so on. So let's start with the rectangular light. What I'm going to do is to find our blueprint, and I'm going to right click here, go to blueprint, and we need to create a structure for this. And I'm going to call this S for structure, and let's call it rectangular light settings. Okay? Now the reason I am creating this within a structure is because we can add a structure to a structure. That's one. And two, I don't want to add many variables here because we need to have the different options of different lights grouped independently together, so we don't have long list of settings. You will see what I mean in a moment. So let's open our structure, press Ctrl space, let's open the rectangular light, and let's add this here, and let's add the variables we want to add. So we said we want the source width, the source height, the barn door angle, and the length. So let's do that. Let's go to our light here, and let's set the source width and the source height, and let's set both to a float. And let's add another. So notice, by the way, when you change something to a float, the more variables you add, they will be the same category. So let's add two more, one for the door angle and one for the door length. And let's verify our settings real quick. So angle and length, height and width. If you also want, we can add a source texture. So let's do that, why not? Let's add a new variable and let's call this source texture. And we need to switch this from a float to texture 2D, okay? Select object reference, and here now we can select a texture. Beautiful. Let's save everything, and let's go now to our other structure. So here's our light rig data structure. We need to add a new variable, and let's call it rect light settings. And let's select our rectangular light settings. So I'm going to press S and type rectangular light settings. Let's save now, and if you take a look, we have these settings now by default. So I'd like to set these default settings here as well. So the default settings of our rectangular light are 64 to 64. The angle, I think it was 20 if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check with this light here. So the angle, sorry, it's 88 and the length is 20. So let's do that here as well. I'm going to set the angle to 88 and the length to 20, and this is empty by default. Let's save this, and while we're at it, let's create another structure. So I'm going to right click, go to blueprint, structure, and I'm going to call this S for structure, spotlight settings. I will double click this, and I will add the first two options, so inner cone and outer cone, and let's set these two floats. And if you add any spotlight, I think the inner cone is 0, the outer cone is 44. And then we can add the source radius and the source length. We can use these on the spotlight and the point light. So let's do that as well. So first here, the inner cone is 0 and the outer cone is 44. And let's add two other variables. So here's for source radius and here for source length. Let's save this, and let's go now to our light rig data to add the structure we just created. So I'm going to add a new variable, and I'm going to call this spotlight settings, and I will select the spotlight structure, the one we just created. Now if you save this and if you take a look at the default settings here, I think since we've added the rectangular light settings before we save the settings, they still have the old settings. So that's okay, we can set them from here again. It's good to know. And now we can save this. Now you may have noticed already that all these now are under one category. And I would say that's one of the limitations of creating the assets within Unreal Engine, that our blueprint will have all the settings under one details panel. If you want something more customized, we need to work with the editor utility widget or C++, and I will leave these for future. For now, we will just do it the old school way, and we will work with the limitations. So let's go back to our blueprint here, and let's compile it as a start so it would work. And now we can see rectangular light settings and the spotlight settings. Of course, as of now, they are not working, and that's what we're gonna do next, is to make these guys work as intended. So let's open our blueprint, let's open our structure to variables function, and let's promote these two structures to variables as well. So promote to a variable and promote to a variable. Connect this here and connect this here. Let's open our rectangular light and let's bring our variable, the rectangular light settings, and let's get it. And you can right click here and split the structure pin. And now we can bring our rectangular light like so, and we can set these settings. So if you search for source, you can set the source width, you can set the source height. So I click on get, we need to set source. I will copy this so we can easily add them. So let's start with the width, then let's start with the height, then let's set the door angle, set barn door angle, and we will do the same for the door length, and finally the texture. So set texture. We can also set the IES texture if you want. In this case, we want to set the source texture like so. And now let's connect these like so as well. And if you want, you can add the multiple rectangular lights for each, or in this scenario, it's okay. Let's add some reroute nodes to keep things nice and organized as much as possible. They don't have to be perfect. So we need to find the balance between actual development and actual satisfying our OCD. Let's connect this here now, and let's connect the settings from our structure. So I'm going to bring this here, and I will move these to the... You can see like it's so easy to create spaghetti. Now let's connect this here, connect this here, connect the door angle to the angle, the length to the length, and the texture to the texture. It's not bad spaghetti. This is like very easy to read, but no problem. Now let's do the same on our spotlight. So this should be also very easy to use. Let's bring the spotlight settings. Let's get it. Right click, split structure pin. I'll bring the spotlight and let's search for inner cone, set it, outer cone, source radius, and the source length. I will connect these and I will get back to you in a second. You can select everything if you want your OCD to be really happy, like so, and press on Q on the keyboard to align them vertically. Now, I'll get back to you soon. If you want to set the source radius and the source length to the point light, you can also do that. So I'm going to quickly do it and get back to you. So in this scenario, we want to get the spotlight settings. We can name this better. We can say spotlight, point light, quote unquote, or we can go to where we have the spotlight settings and we can say on the source radius, spot and point lights, something like this. So we can know that this will work on both the spotlight and the point light. Or you can create a third structure that contain these settings. And I think that's kind of more organized instead of having like really long names. So in this scenario, I will click quickly, duplicate this, and I will call this point light settings. I will open it and I will delete these two and I will keep these two here. And I will go to my data structure. I will add another and I will call this one point light settings. And I will select the point light from here as well. And I will save. Now we can do the same. So we can open the struct to vars. We can promote the point light to a variable as well. Connect this here. Here it says point light 0, I think because I didn't name it here settings. So let's do that. Let's call it point light settings. And let's go back to our blueprint. Select this here and just rename it to point light settings. Now let's go back to our point light settings. This is the spotlight settings, delete it. Let's add the point light settings, get it, right click, split structure pin, get your point light and search for source radius and the source length. Connect everything, connect the execution pin, and now we should be good. So now compile, and it looks like we got an error. This is fine. Let's see where that is. And here maybe because we quickly changed the names and we brought them back to the default value. So that's something to know about structs. So no problem. We can disable these and we can connect them back again with no issues whatsoever. So connect this here, connect this here. It looks like I forgot this, so connect it as well. And now compile and save, and let's take a look at our blueprint. We should be good. Now we can test the settings. So I will go to index 0, for example. This here rectangular light settings, we can change this, the width, the height, the angle of the door, and the length of the door. It's working as intended. For the texture, let's choose anything with a color, just to, if I have anything. So let's switch this, for example, and you can see that our light now is colored. So I'm going to increase the intensity a little. Amazing. So if you switch the light type to a spotlight, this will switch the light type to a spotlight, and these settings will not work anymore unless you switch this back to a rectangular light. They will work as intended. I wish if there was an easy way to hide the spotlight settings and the point light settings when we have the rectangular light selected, but as I said, that only can be done with C++ and the editor utility widgets, which is basically designing your own tools with their own user interfaces. Now, I highly recommend testing the spotlight and the point light on your end as well to see how they work and if you forgot anything or if you want to set anything. So let's set the point light, for example. So 550, beautiful. You can see how this is changing for us. Nice. So let's set this to a low value again so we can still have a nice scene. Let's select these two lights. And there is one final feature we want to build for our tool here that will make it much, much more useful. And that feature is the ability to have presets where you can switch different presets. And that's exactly what we're going to learn after this little rest. So I will see you in a moment. All right, presets. Let's talk about them. Now, to spice things up a little, I'm going to download the car configurator sample that you can find in the samples tab. I'm going to open that project. So I already actually downloaded and opened it, and click on the car, press Ctrl B to locate the car, right click, asset actions, migrate, click OK, then select your project location. In my case, it's called Stay Hydrated. Click on select folder and you will find your car. So here, car configurator, blueprints, here is the car. Okay, this is now me spicing things up. I'm going to hide this for a second. I will select the sofa and I will put them on the side in the darkness. Now look at this. This is so cool. And you can add more lights if you want and play with the adjustments, with the settings, and see how things go. It would be really cool to have multiple presets that we can choose from to change the lighting based on our needs and based on the presets that we can create without the need to create these manually every single time. And it would be cooler if we can have these presets as a starting point that we can adjust as we go. Let's create a new folder. First, let's select our actor, press Ctrl B. And if you want to keep things organized, you can right click and create a new folder. And let's create a folder called presets. If you want, you can create a folder called data and select all these and put them in that folder, or structures and enumerations. If you want to do that, in my case, I'm kind of happy with them now, at least for now, but we will see how it goes. So let's open this folder, presets, and let's create a data asset. So right click, create a blueprint class, and instead of selecting an actor this time, we want to click on this menu here, this arrow, all classes, and we want to search for data asset. Select primary data asset, because here we have select. If you select a data asset, we don't have select. So we need to select this and click on select, then name this something like data asset DA, and let's call this something like light rig preset. And this will be the main actor that we are going to create presets from. You can think of a data asset as a reusable container that stores structured data, like in our case, a saved light rig setup. It lets you define the data outside the blueprint and apply it across many instances. You can think of it as a preset file. We can define it once and then we can load it every time we need it. So now I'm going to open this data asset file, and I'm going to add two variables we want. The first variable is the name of the preset. So let's type name. And for the variable here, we can select name or text. Both are fine. So I'm going to select a text. And the next variable we want to add is the structure we've created earlier. The main structure that contains everything, the light rig data. So I'm going to click on variable and I'm going to call this lights setup, and I'm going to copy the name here and I will click on the variable and I will paste this and I will select the structure light rig data. I will select this again and I will switch it from single to an array, and then I will compile and save. That's it for this data asset, the parent data asset. Now, let's start creating our presets. So I'm going to press Ctrl space, and next to our preset here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to where we have miscellaneous, and then I'm going to click on data asset. So this is the parent, and the data asset we want to create is the data asset. It will inherit its settings from the parent data asset we made. So when you create a data asset, you will find here all classes. Within these classes, we are going to find the light rig preset that we just made, and we added two variables too. So now when we select this as a class for our data asset instance, so let's give this a name. For example, I'm going to call this DA or preset. This time, let's call it 3-point light, for example. Now, when you open this file here, you will see that it has two variables. One is for the name and one for the lights setup. So here I can add as many lights as I want, and I can set their settings, and we are going to have a place to drop them here, and they will override the settings that we have here, the lights setup. So I hope this makes sense. Let me show you how we are going to achieve this. So I'm going to select my blueprint and I'm going to press Ctrl E to open the blueprint editor, and we want to create a function. So let's click on the function button here to create a new function, and let's call it something like apply preset. That's one. Number two, we want to add an object reference for our data asset, the light rig preset. So I'm going to copy its name because it's the fastest way to find it, and I'm going to click on the variable here and I'm going to add rig preset. Then for the type of the variable, I'm going to paste the name of the object we just created. So data asset light rig preset, and let's select object reference. Click on this, and we want to switch this to a single element if it's not a single element already. Now compile. Now we can assign an object here, or the presets basically. So I'm going to make this a public variable, and I will compile. And now if I click here, you will see here we have the rig preset, and this asset here, they can be assigned here, and later, or now, actually what we're gonna make is a button called apply preset. When we click on it, it will apply whatever we have here on the lights setup array we have here. All right, so let's go back to our blueprint. And before we continue working on our preset here, I want to PSA, public service announcement. We should not leave our variables like this. So there will be blueprints where you add even more and more variables. What's really recommended is to create some sort of groups. So all these variables from here to here, they are part of one function, the function here from the past that we've created to promote everything into a variable. So we can create a category for these, and we can collapse the view of that category to see what we need to see in more organized manner, which is the variables list here. So for example, since we promoted all these to variables, we can set the category to be something like promoted variables. That's one example. Or you can give it any descriptive name you have. So let's say promoted variables. Now I can click and drag and add all these to my list here, to the category, like so. And I can now hide this. And now we see only the two public variables we are working with, the lights setup and the rig preset, the object reference of our data asset. And for these two, we can put them in a category and we can call it something like studio rig or studio light rig, whatever name you like, and click and drag, add this here, compile and save. And notice now how this went from default to Studio Light Rig, which is more descriptive and nice. Alright, let's work on the presets now. Let's go to the function we've created and let's add the rig preset we've created earlier, the object reference. Let's get it, and we can, or we should, convert this into a validated get. So we have two options. We can either check if this object is valid, and if it's valid we want to execute the logic. If it's not valid we want to do nothing. And basically if it's valid or not, it means this here, if it has an actor or a preset assigned to it or not. So if there is something assigned, then it's valid. If there is nothing assigned, like none for now, it will be not valid, therefore we don't want to do anything. And this is like a security measure, if you will. In such scenarios, it may prevent the engine from crashing or getting some error messages, and we do this in many other scenarios to check for the validity of our objects or the blueprint or the logic we are creating. So that's one way we can bring this node. If you click and drag, search for is valid, the one with the question mark. And there are scenarios where we have objects like this and we get it. You can right click and you can convert to validated get. Both options are fine. So first, let's add this here. Second, we want to get the information within this rig preset. And the information, if you remember, it's the light setups we've created here. So by now, this is the first preset we've created. It has 3 lights. We didn't set them. So right now it says 4 array elements. Let's remove one of these array elements. And let's call this, for example, 3-point light setup. And here, let's set one of them to 300, the arm length, the other to 450, for example, and this one to 600. Then this one, let's say, keep it on 0. This one, let's say, is 30 on the z-axis, and this one is minus 30. Let's say this is a basic preset we want to create just to test our logic as we progress. So this array here, this information, we need to get it and we need to set it on our actor when we apply the preset. So from here, from rig preset, the object reference, we can get the name if you want, and we can also get lights setup, the variable name. So if you search or if you click and drag from here, you can type get as a start, and you can see here variables, default, we have get name and get lights setup. So click on this, and since this is an array, we need to do for each loop. So click and drag and press on F to add for each loop node for S, and connect the is valid to the execution pin here. For is not valid, we don't want to do anything. Okay? So from here, what we need to do is to bring the lights setup, and I think I should give the preset here a better name. I will call it preset light setup, so we don't mix our two variables. Okay? So this now called preset light setup, and this lights setup is our original variable where we set our options from here, just so we don't mix. From here, we need to get this array. Let's get it. And we want to add the elements within our preset to that array, to lights setup. Now, before I do that, I want to get rid of the for each loop, and I want to do the following. I'm going to simply hold Alt and set this. So this now array, when we do this, apply preset, we will get whatever information within this variable, within this preset, and any other preset that you create later, and simply override whatever values we have here. Okay, so this is the first method that I did before I create this tutorial, and this kind of works for testing and learning purposes. Let's just go with this for now. And you might wonder, okay, where is the button you talked about? Well, for that button, click on your function here, and then click on call an editor. Let's set this to true and compile, and now take a look. Here we have apply preset. So just like we organized our variables earlier here, we can also organize our functions. Right now this function is set to category to default. Click here and set this to Studio Light Rig, and let's compile and let's save. So now you can see under Studio Light Rig, we have Apply Preset and our presets here. So I'm going to create a copy of this blueprint and I'm going to click on Apply Preset, and you can see that this did override our array, but nothing's changed here yet, and this is an engine limitation that we can fix it or work around it in a moment. But for now, if you simply change any value to, like, let's say 9 or 8, you will see now that we have the preset we've created earlier. This is set to 300, 450, and this is set to 600. Now, if you switch this here to a new value, so let's say I want the temperature to be 3500, let's save this, and let's go back here, click on Apply Preset. This will override the setting here, but again, we need to change any value that we can change so we can see what's happening here in order to apply the changes, which is, as I said, a simple engine limitation. We need to either change the values from here, or we need to change or rotate our actor, like so. And now we can edit the values we have here after we assign the preset. That's one way where we can work with this, and this works nicely. Now, if you are like me, you want to learn about the second or the other method, and in this case, they won't have any difference at all. I want to talk about other approach where we can set our button here, Apply Preset, which is earlier, if you remember, we created for each loop. So let's remove this for now. I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to connect for each loop as our initial setup like this. And I will bring my lights setup here. I will get it, and this array, I want to add the array elements to it. So I'm going to click on Add, like so. Connect this here and connect this here, okay? Now, we need to clear the array before we add anything to it, but before we do, let me show you what happens if we don't clear it. So now, in our preset, there are 3 lights, and here we have 3 array elements. So every time we apply the preset, this will add more lights for our array element here. And you can see now we are having duplicates of the lights. So if you want to avoid this, before we run for each loop, we want to get this array here and we want to clear it. So we can clear it here or clear it here, it doesn't really matter. Let's click and drag and clear the array like this and add it like so and compile. And now when we add new preset, it will clear the array and it will add the array elements to it every single time, which is how exactly it should work. So now I've created another preset so we can test what's happening. Let me delete all the lights we have in the scene so we can only count on this setup here. So now if I turn off, it will be turned off, and if I bring it back, we will have this beautiful light. And this light here is from our preset as we just talked. And let's say you want to change this light. All you need to do is to find your preset. So the more presets you create, you can also click on the drop down menu and you're going to find your presets here, which is very nice. So here, if I switch the preset, I'm going to click on pink preset and I will click now on apply preset. And again, we want to change this just a little bit. You can see that this will give us the new preset. Now, if you don't want to change any of the values here, it would be nice to have some sort of button to update that for us. So we want to create a dummy variable that we can call it refresh construction script to update the selected preset without the need to select the preset like this, apply it, and then move the location, because this is definitely not practical. Let's fix that. Let's open our blueprint and let's create a new variable here and let's call it something like refresh settings. Let's switch this to a boolean and let's add this boolean to the Studio Light Rig and let's make it into instance editable and let's move it to the very top as well, like so. Now, let's click and drag this boolean, let's get it, and we want to bring a branch node. So click and drag and press on B to add a branch node. Now, we want to disconnect the construction script from for each loop and connect it here. And we want to connect true and false both here. But before we do, I want to bring the refresh settings connected to true and I want to set it to false. What this is going to do, every time we set this to true from our details panel here, like so, it will be also set to false immediately, as we can see here now. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to set this to true. Now it's true, and I'm going to click again to set it to false. What I don't want is for this to be true like this. I just want it always to be on false, and I click and it will update the settings for us. So that's why we connect this here and then connect it here like so. And on false, click and drag, add reroute nodes like this, and connect this here as well. Now, this sounds interesting, I know, but this is one of the main ways we can deal with the construction script not updating as intended in Unreal Engine. So this has been going on for ages with Unreal Engine, and this one workaround to solve this. So now if I click on refresh settings, it will update as you can see here. So I'm going to click or to save everything, and I'm going to click on false. It's still false, but technically it changed. It did fire. So now all you need to do is to create your presets, then select any preset you want, and instead of changing anything, you can simply click here to apply that preset. So of course nothing is happening now because we need to apply the actual preset, and now click again to set the preset. So I'm going to click and click, apply the preset, click again, and as you can see, this is working beautifully. Now, if you don't want to click on apply preset and refresh settings, but you are willing to sacrifice changing the values we have here, you can do the following. You can go here, then you can click on the function we've created and add that here. So construction script, it will apply the preset and then it will do the rest of the logic. In this case, let's say this. So this does not really exist. I'm going to bring it back to where it was though. And now I'm going to switch the preset to this. As you can see, it updated immediately. And there we go, like so. Now the problem though, we cannot change any of the settings. So maybe that's something okay for you. Maybe no, you prefer this scenario here where we don't have this and we have the following logic where we change the preset, click on apply, click on refresh, and we are good. Now, behind the scenes, I experimented with a mode where I can select manual mode or preset mode. However, I don't want to overcomplicate things for today. I think that's enough. It's been already more than an hour. So let's keep it here for today. I really hope you enjoyed today's lesson. If you want to see more lessons like this in the future, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to do me a favor, leave a like, subscribe, share with a friend. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you use this to your advantage. Show me what you're going to create. And as always, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one. Also, stay hydrated. Bye bye.